Welcome back to the Freshly Squeezed podcast. Again, it's Pratik over here with my buddy Christian, and well, the finals are over, man. So
Yes,
LeBron
sir.
James and AD get their fourth friggin' ring.
Well, AD gets his first, but
Oh yeah, AD gets
LeBron
his
gets
first.
his
Sorry, yeah,
fourth.
AD gets his
Yeah, man.
first.
Yeah, man. Well deserved for both of them, I'd say. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
I think a lot of the conversation is going to be like, I mean, how easy it was for them in terms of that game being a blowout, and I think that how lopsided that game was last night. You knew after the first half that it was going to be an easy lock for the championship win there. I think a lot of the people are going to be talking about trying to invalidate the ring maybe a little bit, but I think that's as well deserved a ring as you can get during this offseason. And coming up against the Miami Heat team, which look at who they beat to get to the finals. I think if it was a team like the Bucks, it would be completely valid. Everyone would be saying the ring is legit. It's one of his better rings because of how good that Bucks team was. But the Heat got through that Bucks team. They got through a really tough Boston Celtics team, a savage Boston Celtics team. So I think that's as good a competition as they could face, and they handled them with absolute ease. And so I see you shaking your head and maybe a
I don't know.
disagreement, but I think the way this year's gone, that's as tough a road to the finals they could have had. And you look at Portland, how easy they got through them. Everyone was saying, "Oh, after the first game, Portland might beat him. This is an insane first round matchup. He's got to deal with Dame in the first round. This team isn't an 8 seed." Blow through them after the first game, swept them right after that, right? Next
I
round.
mean, I saw that coming though. I expected LeBron to do that. Honestly, bro, my whole thing was I didn't even want this Heat series to go to Game 6. Obviously, we said 5-1, but I was already saying that if LeBron swept, then that was a statement piece. Like, you guys are nothing yet. Like, you know what I mean? Come on, he
But
hasn't
that
won a
Heat
Heat
team
series.
isn't a joke, man. Like, what if it was the Bucks? Would you expect the Bucks to have won a couple games? Like,
The
if the
Heat
Bucks
team,
didn't flame out in the
bro.
second
Let's
round,
talk about who's on the Heat team. Out of everybody who entered the playoffs when they started, you
yeah,
have Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Goran Dragic, Tyler Harrow, and Duncan Robinson. Out of nowhere, these five people. First of all, Jimmy Butler isn't even a superstar. Now he can be like categorized as like a leader type star. He's not like superstar offensive level, but
I
he's
disagree.
like
I think he proved himself to be a superstar these playoffs. I disagree with that. But continue your point.
I mean, it has to be another run like that, you know? That was like I mean, finals run is hard. I can't take away from Jimmy, bro. Jimmy did a hell of a job. I shouldn't talk about Jimmy. I should talk about the rest of the players. Like if you're comparing the rest of the players to every supporting cast that went into the playoffs, that's not like LeBron faced what there were basically three rookie teams into the they're all rookie teams that entered the Western Conference and Eastern Conference finals. And that's what
Houston
LeBron had to
wasn't.
beat.
Houston wasn't.
Sorry, no, Denver though. Denver was the WCF, right?
Yeah, I don't. That's those are tough teams to
Denver,
go up against, though.
Celtics,
But
Denver, Celtics, and Heat. They were the last four contending teams.
I think there's a little too much discrediting going on about those teams. I mean, Denver was a savage team. Look at what Jamal Murray was doing and Jokic was doing going into that Western Conference Finals, and the way that
Right,
they handled them so easily. Okay, go ahead.
but it's those two players though. I'm not taking away from them two as a player performance. I'm just saying the team is not that good.
Oh, I couldn't disagree with you more. I think their supporting cast is amazing over there in Denver as well.
Yeah, Michael
I
Porter
think
Jr.
Gary
Yeah,
Harris,
Gary
Michael
Harris.
Porter Jr. They got a lot of guys who can ball over there in Denver. Plumlee, who's a good backup big, who can pass really well. Paul Millsap, a guy who he was playing really well, draining some threes, playing really well going into that series. I think that was a good team, and I kind of expect this, and I expect this from the media, but I think a lot of the teams are going to get underrated going into it because you think of Denver and you don't think of it as a big superstar franchise market. It's not one of these teams that have been dominant over the past years, but they're a team that's been up there in the Western Conference, a hard Western Conference. Every year we talk about how good is this Western Conference, and they've been up there as a top seed for at least the past 3 years. They've been one of the top seeds. with those guys, and Jokic leading the way. So I think that's a team that's as tough to beat as most teams are. And they got through the Clippers team that everyone thought was, I picked the Clippers as a favorite to win the championship. And they rolled through, came back from 3-1 against that Clippers team, a tough Clippers team. As much as we blame the Clippers for that flameout, you have to give as much credit to Denver for doing that to them.
Right.
Kawhi Leonard and Paul. Yeah, okay.
Losing a 3-1 lead is terrible, bro. That's a huge choke job.
But who came back from the 3-1 lead? You look at LeBron coming back from 3-1 against Golden State Warriors.
I get it. Denver came back from a 3-1 lead, but like the Clippers, the difference between them at that level versus what they could be is huge. Like there's a big gap between that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like,
you're saying they didn't perform.
Yeah, exactly. They
which is part of it. But
like
what
peak performing Clippers could give Lakers a solid run for their money. That could be a dangerous matchup for them. You know what I mean? That is
exactly. Yes, I agree.
Really
and the Denver team
for LeBron.
Exactly. And Denver got through that team. Again, Denver got through that team. You're saying is going to be a tough load for LeBron. And you're saying, I got your point. You're saying they're not peak. As much as they choked, Denver stepped up. I don't think it's one way. I don't think it's a one-way trip. I think Denver stepped up. And then people say this was the conversation. Anytime an underdog is winning games, it's because the other team chokes. It's not because the underdog is playing well. And I hate this narrative in the NBA because it was the same thing when the Mavericks beat LeBron's Heat. And when was it 2011 the Mavericks won that? 2011 or 2013, something like that. Might have been 2012. Any one of those 3 years.
2013?
The Mavericks and Dirk got through that team. No one expected it. He played unbelievable, and they were saying LeBron was one of the biggest choke jobs in sports when not giving the Mavericks how good that Mavericks team was, how good Dirk Nowitzki was playing. And I just see it as a constant theme in the NBA because everyone expects the top seeds to win the championship. It's always the 1 or 2 seeds, and we've talked about this. So when a 5th seed like the Heat comes along, or when a team like the Denver Nuggets, who everyone's not so high upon, even though they're a top seed, but they're not the Lakers or the Clippers, they always underrate them. And I think they try to diminish the value of the wins from these big teams, like the Lakers getting through that Denver team. And I'm saying this to say the Lakers getting through that Denver team in 5 games was as impressive as anything. They walked through that Denver team without issue. And they kind of did the same here with Miami. Miami pulled out 2 wins because Jimmy Butler heroics. LeBron played amazing. AD had some off nights, but he played well for the most part. He played really well. So I think this Lakers team's as strong as ever, and I expect them to compete for another championship next year. I don't see any of these teams how they can get so much better to the point where they can knock off this Lakers team, except for the Brooklyn Nets over there in the East.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So, I mean, unless I'll step back a little. I don't see anyone taking over for the Lakers, but I do see, speaking about this, I do see Denver getting better and being able to compete, maybe push them to 6 or 7 games in a series. Because Denver with Michael Porter Jr. developing, with Bol now, having some experience coming off the late end of the season there, and he's going to get better all season and now getting the feel of the NBA. So Bol coming into his sophomore year, I think he can actually step up and that'll be really interesting. But I think they'll be better, not as good as Lakers, but I think they'll be better. But other than that, it's that Brooklyn Nets team they're going to have to worry about over there in the East, meeting up with in the finals. Other than that, do you see anyone else stepping up next year to compete with this Lakers team?
Well, if Miami makes some sort of move, because all these rumors about Miami being the hottest location for another big star.
Yep.
Before all that locker room talk used to happen, like Jimmy was the worst player in the locker room, back on Chicago and things like that. Everybody, all the staff were crying, about this guy's the worst person.
Minnesota.
That
practice that got him traded, that practice where he took the B team players and beat the A team with them. He beat Cat, beat down on Wiggins. Yeah, calling out the coach all practice. Yeah, no, I agree. But that's the stuff where I would have thought he would have meshed well in Philly. He did great in Philly. The rest of Philly didn't adjust to Jimmy Butler. And when he went over to Miami,
Embiid whines too much too, man. These
oh,
kids,
and Brett Brown too, man. They
Brown,
didn't fit that culture. There was no leader on that team. So Butler stepping right into that Miami team who didn't have a star, and we've talked about this. You're right. If they add another star, if they add an all-star somehow this offseason, not too sure who's available for them to pick up, who would be interested in going to Miami. But they could. That's a good point. They could be a top seed in the East and compete
and
there.
again, the reason I'm saying that LeBron didn't have. I'll say he had a tough road if these teams that he beat can do it again next year. Then I'll give his thing more credit. I'll give his championship more credit.
That's a fair point.
Because you cannot just claim, like getting on a hot run against big teams that had high expectations in a bubble, and then like things just fell apart because it did for most superstar teams this playoff season. So many upsets happened, bro. This playoffs was like ridiculous. Like everyone was just like, what the fuck is going on? Honestly, bro, it was actually insane. So that's my only point is once I see that go down, then and I don't doubt my boy Jokic and Jamal Murray. I'm just saying that they need to do it again though, because I can't just give them like credit like you guys were.
That's fair enough. You want to see sustained for success from them, but so I think it'll happen again. I see that team going just as far next year. I think they'll be just as good.
With how gross they were in the playoffs this year, no pressure.
I think we're lagging out a little bit.
These guys are gonna go nuts. Like bro, Curry and Clay. Oh.
I missed what you said, but keep going. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, but let's not forget about Golden State too, man. Curry and Clay coming back. That's going to be good.
Man, oh my God. Did I forget about Golden State? That'll be I did forget about that'll be really interesting. Curry, Steph, Clay, it'll be really interesting. Wiggins, how he fits over there with Draymond back.
Draymond back, yeah.
Oh man, I completely forgot. How do they fit down over there? That's crazy.
That's what I mean.
Golden State Warriors, I have no idea where they're going to slide in. And that's just, I picked Steph up in fantasy earlier this year, expecting him to go off. When he got injured, that was the saddest thing of all time. But man, what will he be able to do with Clay? And early on, when he was able to play, and when he came back later in the season, he wasn't putting up the numbers he used to, but I would argue because that was because Clay wasn't on the floor as well. And having a guy like Clay to be able to space the floor and give Steph a little more freedom, because you have the threat of the second best three-point shooter in this league, who's gone all year, that gives you a lot of room to work with and a lot of space to work with. So Steph, that'll be really interesting. Good point. I didn't even think about that, But that sounds like they could be. That's going to be a test for whoever they end up seeing and how they start out in the regular season. There's going to be some road bumps. I'm assuming coming back from those injuries and kind of getting back into the flow of things. So expect a slow start to their season, but when they get hot and they get rolling, that is a scary team. So good point. Yeah, they have every opportunity to compete for a championship whenever those guys are on the court.
Yeah. And well, besides those guys, I don't know why I just wanted to jump back into the Raptors for a second, just because.
No, of course.
See, the way we're talking about these teams, man, the way we're talking about these teams coming out of these playoffs, I think Raptors are gonna have a rough time next year, like maybe just a little bit.
Well, they're going to be middle of the pack. Like this year, I was expecting them to be third. I was expecting them to be third, fourth seed.
Near the top, yeah.
Yeah, a little higher. This year I expect them to, because I expected Philly to be up there, so the second seed was obviously surprising to me, because I expected maybe Boston and Philly to jump up, but obviously Philly had a horrible year, didn't come near expectations, and Boston was right behind us, so we definitely had a wonderful year. Don't expect that to be coming around this year. I'm with you. It's not gonna be a rough year, I don't think. I just think we have to manage expectations, and we're not a championship contender this year. This year coming up, it's gonna be Milwaukee's gonna try and regroup and see what they can pull together. I'm not sure if they're gonna be able to get any free agents coming this offseason, but it's gonna be Milwaukee. It's gonna be Miami Heat, to your point. It's gonna be Brooklyn. and maybe Boston. Boston's going to be near the top again. We'll see what Philly can do with a new head coach, but those I think are going to be the top four. And then kind of Philly, Toronto, hanging around that 5 to 6 seed. So that'll be really interesting. But managing expectations, it's not a championship year, so it's going to be a fun year for Raptors fans. Just enjoy the ride. See, hopefully we'll be able to surpass expectations a little bit, pull out some big wins. Maybe have a first round playoff upset or something like that. But let's just look to have some fun. I'm with you. But to that point of because bringing back, and I didn't mention Toronto Raptors in this conversation, bringing it back to how the competition wasn't as good for maybe LeBron. What if the Raptors happened to sneak by that Game 7 with the Celtics, beat the Heat, and end up in the finals against the Lakers? Would you have expected them? How many games would you have expected them to win there against that Lakers team? Because I keep wondering about that, how we would have done.
I honestly believe that Raptors are the same. Actually, no. Game 5 too. I would have predicted the same thing.
Just a sec.
I honestly
5
would have
games?
predicted the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I would have expected us to take 2 games off them like Miami did.
I would have expected them to, right? But my expectation is that LeBron would have tried to finish in 5-1. Like, obviously, we gave our takes for the Heat before.
Do you think there's anyone who would have matched up better than the Heat?
I actually think the Celtics could. No. The Celtics could not have done better. The Heat were good, man. They were good. They were just really small. I don't really know who could have.
It was the size, right? It was the size,
Yeah.
and that's what makes me think Milwaukee would have done better, because they would have forced them. They had the best defense in the league, and so obviously they seemingly collapsed in that series, and Heat took them to town in that series. But I think the Bucks would have done a great job with their size, and Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez guarding the paint, a little bigger bodies, being able to put on Anthony Davis. Brook Lopez is a great shot blocker for as much flack as he might take. He's a great shot blocker, great in the defensive end, and he drains threes. So I think he would have been. I think they would have been a really tough matchup for that Laker team, and that's why I'm putting so much. Emphasis on why I think the Lakers deserve this. Like, the Heat got through that Milwaukee team that people were saying they were the championship favorites. Out of the East, it was either going to be Milwaukee or it was going to be Clippers and Lakers, right? And that was a huge shock, and people forget that it was a second round exit. That was a massive shock for the Heat to beat that team. So
Actually, even the Raptors were more favorites, So they were Raptors were predicted to be in the ECF versus Milwaukee.
They were, yeah. And I didn't like our matchup against Milwaukee. I didn't like that.
I
Like,
did not like
Milwaukee this year. I mean, after last year we lost Kawhi and Danny Green, 2 great defenders. I thought it would have been an interesting matchup, and with Gasol playing the way he was. But obviously we didn't get to see either of those teams in the ECF. So it was an interesting year. But overall, well done, LeBron. We'll see next year, to your point. If these same teams, these same top elite teams, we expect like Denver and Miami, will they be able to do it again? And I think, to your point, that's right. I think it will validate this ring a little more if they are able to do it again next year and prove that they're still top dogs.
No.
Miami will be interesting. I expect Denver to do it. Miami is going to be interesting to see what kind of stars they get, because obviously they weren't a regular season team this year.
Well, yeah. Well, apparently now that Jimmy Butler is so good in the locker room, he's a great platform, So
Yeah.
just being sarcastic.
No.
So many haters, bro.
Well, I think there's a lot of people in the NBA
Yeah,
that's competitive spirit, that dog kind of energy. Like, they're all dogs and rough riders over there, right? So that kind of energy, I think, will attract a lot of guys. Like, how many guys? If you say maybe a quarter of the guys in the NBA are like that, like, I would say that's fair to say. A quarter of the guys in the best league in the world have that dog mentality. I think that's fair to say. They would love it over there in Miami, right? So I think that's a huge free agent market, to your point.
I agree.
So
So
it'll be
speaking
interesting.
of validation, let's talk about next year, because Brooklyn will be most likely the finals contender, right?
I don't even want to think about Brooklyn. I don't even want to think about Brooklyn.
They're a
That's
threat,
scary to
bro,
me, man.
'cause that's a
No,
scary
that's
ass team.
very scary because Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, like Kevin Durant's a guy who I never watched early on in his career in OKC. I only watched highlights of. And when he was on Golden State, I was kind of forced to watch him because obviously they had all those runs and how good that team was. Oh my goodness, man. He is so lethal. It's not fun to watch him as a team rooting against him. It's not fun because he's too damn good. Him, I remember in a regular season game against the Raptors in our championship year, just a regular season game. Him fading away in the corner to force OT, one of the toughest shots I've ever seen. They didn't have Steph or Clay. They were out. It was just him running that team, and he put on like a 40-point performance. It was him versus Kawhi. We pulled it out in OT, but this man was giving me absolute heart attacks in what should have been an easy win for us. And it's like, I can't deal with it. That dagger he hit on LeBron against Cleveland in the finals from that same spot. He loves that wing spot, and he hits it from deep. And no one can come close to contesting it. It's wide open. Those are practice shots, and it's just scary. And I'm excited for the town of Brooklyn. I'm excited for New York. Knicks fans, I'm excited for hopefully. Knicks fans need to hop off the bandwagon and get their butt over to Brooklyn. They need to get their butt over to Brooklyn right now because it'll do two things. One, it'll make them happier because they can finally cheer for a team that'll win, right? That's number one. Number two,
That's gonna make them.
it'll let James Dolan know he needs to get his shit together. He needs to get his act together because the Knicks, what they're doing right now, it's atrocious. It's horrible for the state of New York. It's horrible for everyone's mental state over there, and so the fans need to stop going to games. They need to take money out of Dolan's pocket. That's the only way they're going to wake up in that city. So I think get your butt over to Brooklyn. Get over to that arena. Support that team because they're going to be playing winning basketball, and I'm excited for them. But I don't know if New York fans can do it. Like, can they hop off the Knicks bandwagon? I hope they can. They need to get off of there. I'm sorry.
I agree with but I guess you could say, they're so like, they are for their city, man. Like, they identify very strongly from where they're from.
They are, but Brooklyn's not far away, man. And hey, you know what? You got Jay-Z supporting the team.
Brooklyn
He's a part owner of that
I
team.
agree.
Like, it's a cool city.
Yeah,
Brooklyn's
exactly.
a cool city, right? So hopefully
Brooklyn is a cool
they make the
city.
switch. Yeah, man.
Biggie Smalls came out of there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, that's it. I think we got to wrap it up. But
Yeah,
thanks for
definitely.
tuning in, everyone. We appreciate it. We're going to be having more talks about this. I think one thing we didn't talk about was how what this means for LeBron, kind of as a stepping stone on his way to the GOAT status, right? And so I'm sure we'll talk about that more in later videos. We have a lot of off-season videos to make, a lot of free agency to break down. That's the best part of basketball, man. I love free agency. I love this stuff. Who's going
free
where?
agency, too.
Like, it's the best. Rumors flying everywhere. Seeing what's teams getting better. It can change the whole landscape of the NBA. So we'll be coming out to you with more videos in the off season. I'm super excited about that. But other than that, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Peace.
Cool. Peace out.